Good morning and welcome to the Search Laboratory webinar on using automation to optimize PPC campaigns. My name is Alan Davis. I'm the Global Marketing Director for Search Labs. I'm here with my colleague Pete Whitmarsh, our Head of Paid Media, who is giving the presentation today. Pete's teams manage paid media spend of over £50 million, and Pete has personal experience of large and complex campaigns for clients like House of Fraser, River Island, and Nokia, so he really knows his stuff. If you haven't worked with Search Labs before, we are a full-service digital agency that specializes in large integrated campaigns. We have over 140 staff and offices in Leeds, London, and New York. We were recently voted Best Organic Team at the Drum Search Awards and Best Large PPC Agency at the US Search Awards in Las Vegas, where the judges made special mention of some of the techniques Pete's going to discuss today. We are recording the webinar and we'll share a link later today, so you don't need to take screenshots. And please do use the chat function to ask questions, which we will try to answer after Pete's presentation. Over to you, Pete.
Okay, thank you very much for the intro, Alan. So yeah, just to quickly run through the agenda for today. So I want to talk firstly about the history of PPC, kind of see where it's come from and where we are now. I'll talk through some examples of automation. I also want to look a bit into Amazon as well, and how Amazon have been growing recently and how they're starting to enter the PPC world. And also looking at the future, so my predictions for what's going to happen next. So yeah, starting with the history of PPC then. So I've been at Search Lab for almost 8 years now. I've been working in PPC all that time. So I thought it'd be interesting to start off by looking at where was PPC 8 years ago. So what did PPC look like when I first joined Search Laboratory? So it was quite simple really compared to where it is now. You had quite simple ads. You had keywords, negative keywords. You set your bids at a keyword level and nothing else. You measured things on a last click attribution model, and you just measured your online conversions, and that was kind of all there was to it. It was also far less competitive back in these days, so clicks were typically a bit cheaper, therefore it was a bit easier to succeed online as well. So it was something that I think a lot of people were doing maybe as a small part of their role, just a little bit on the side. We even worked with MDs back in these days who were just sort of playing with PPC on the side because it wasn't too complicated back then. However, over the last 8 years, that has all changed. And if we look at the current PPC landscape, so it's kind of particularly focusing on AdWords, but really the same can be said for all the other sort of advertising platforms out there as well. Things are way more complex now. So we have far more complicated ads with a whole bunch of different extensions and things like video ads, native ads, loads of different targeting options. So targeting by demographics, by interests, as well as things like remarketing, customer match, similar audiences. Bidding is far more complicated. So you're not just setting a bid for a keyword, but you're also adjusting that bid based on a bunch of other overlaying factors. When it comes to measurement, there's loads of different ways that you can do things as well. So it's not just last click on attribution of online conversions. There's all sorts of other attribution models. You also might be measuring things like phone conversions, store visits, cross-device conversions, linking up your CRM, looking at post-view conversions. So that's a far more complex journey now as well. And I've also added shopping into this. So 8 years ago, shopping didn't exist, at least in Google AdWords it didn't exist. It was kind of a natural part of Google's algorithm, but that's now a huge part of PPC as well, and has really changed the landscape of retail PPC. So yeah, where we are nowadays, it's not going to work that just an MD can do this on the side as part of their job. There's a huge level of complexity here. that everyone needs really strong data analysis skills and really development skills as well to be able to cope with this huge wealth of data and the amount of levers that we can pull to operate a PPC campaign. So how do we overcome this? Well, the answer really, and the main thing that I want to talk about today, is automation. So computers are cleverer than we are. They can make smart decisions. They can make robust decisions on a highly regular basis. They're not prone to any sort of human error. They don't have sick days or holiday days. So computers can be a very reliable way to help out with the management of a PPC campaign. And to illustrate this, at Search Laboratory, our PPC team at the moment is about 25 people. In addition to that, we've also got a development team of 8 people who support with the PPC accounts. So that's grown massively over the last few years. And we've had to grow that development team because there's been more and more of a need for doing more and more automation for our clients. So there's a few different things that I can be talking about when I'm talking automation. So firstly, I'm talking about APIs. So an API is basically a place where you can develop code and software that interfaces directly with the advertising platforms. I'm talking about scripts, so typically AdWords scripts. These tend to be for a little more ad hoc jobs, maybe a little simpler jobs. All you need really is a little bit of JavaScript knowledge and you can get started with this. There's also a lot of kind of free pre-made scripts available online if you just do a search for things. And then I'm also talking about software. So software that you can go out there and buy. These tend to be the more premium solutions. You get things like DoubleClick Search, Marin, Kensho, various other systems, as well as kind of specialist systems, maybe just for reporting, just for bidding, just for kind of various functions. So looking into a few examples of where you might want to actually use automation in a PPC account. The first one that I wanted to start with was bidding. So I imagine maybe a lot of people on this webinar or kind of people that they've been working with are probably using some kind of auto bidding technology. It is really important to have a good strategy for managing bids on your keywords. If you've got tens of thousands of keywords, hundreds of thousands of keywords, it's next to impossible to stay on top of this manually. So having an automated bidding system is really vital. I've listed a few of the bidding systems here. So BidLab in the middle there is actually our in-house bidding solution. So BidLab works on a kind of hierarchical system that understands the semantics of the different keywords and uses that data to come up with sensible bidding decisions. Some of the other ones on there, the likes of DoubleClick, Kensho, Marin, they all kind of work on a portfolio bidding system. Google AdWords auto bidding as well. I probably wouldn't have in the past had this on the list because it didn't used to be particularly good, but it's come a long way. Google AdWords are using a lot of Google's machine learning technology now, so they're able to make far more sophisticated decisions in their bidding technology. So yeah, all of these systems have pros and cons, really. I'm not on here to say you need to use this particular one, but there are lots of bidding systems out there. AdWords auto bidding is actually a great start. If you haven't done any auto bidding before, I'd definitely recommend that as kind of the simple starting position, really. Another really important area to use automation is particularly in retail. If you're managing a large inventory of different products, retail PPC can be extremely difficult and extremely complex, extremely tough to stay on top of everything and make sure everything is up to date in line with the changes in your product catalog. So products will be going in and out of stock and you want your PPC campaigns to reflect that. Prices will change, so maybe you want to update adverts, you maybe want to update bid prices in line with how aggressive your pricing is. You'll be getting new products on board, so you need to make sure you've got a strategy for actually launching those quickly and being visible on those quickly. You'll be having sales and promotions, so you need to make sure that that data is properly reflected in the ad messaging and that the landing pages are appropriate and everything like that. So there's a lot of complexity with this. there's different ways to tackle this. I just wanted to look at kind of a specific example here. So I've got a list of keywords here, kind of roughly going from short tail at the top to long tail at the bottom. So the shorter tail keywords have more search volume. The longer tail keywords typically have a higher conversion rate. If someone's done their research and they're searching for something more specific, then they're generally going to be more likely to convert on those keywords. And this is just a small snapshot. In reality, looking at watchers, there's going to be hundreds of thousands of different variations of long tail keywords. I think the mistake that a lot of people make when managing PPC accounts is that they're focused too much on this stuff. And you can kind of understand why you might do, because there's a lot of search volume behind this. And realistically, it is quite easy to manage this stuff when you've got a lot of data. It means the actual decisions that you're making tend to be quite easy because there's a lot of sort of statistical significance backing up those decisions. When you're looking at longer tail keywords, it does become far harder to manage. So not only kind of making the decisions based on the data, but also kind of making sure that the ad messages, making sure that everything's staying up to date for these keywords. So to run through an example of that, if you do a search, as a user, you do a search for men's Casio G-Shock watches, what you want to see are really, really relevant ad texts that absolutely match up with what a website is going to offer. So in these ad texts here, you can see from just £53, so there's a price in there, range of 82, so there's something that's kind of dynamically pulled in how many products are available in that range. In the second advert, there's up to 47% off. We've also used the phrase massive range there. So you might look at these and think, how on earth can you keep all of this up to date? And what happens then if you get a new product in, which is maybe cheaper than £53, or your sale changes, so the 47% off isn't relevant anymore, or maybe the size of the range drops and you don't want, say, massive range anymore. So you can use automations to stay on top of this. We've got a system that we use called FeedLab. There's other systems out there. There's a system in double-click search called inventory campaigns, which allow you to do this as well. And the idea of this is basically, as things change in your catalog, as things are updated on your website, you need to make sure the ad texts are actually reflecting that, so that the user gets an absolutely seamless experience from search term to ad text to the website. Another example of where we use automation is for monitoring accounts. I like to think of this as, I suppose, really as a PPC manager, it's easy to waste a lot of time just monitoring accounts and just checking that everything's doing as it should be, really. So you might be looking out for things like traffic spikes, or maybe sudden drop-offs in traffic, or other metrics that you're monitoring. Things like pages breaking, so sending traffic to 404 pages. Maybe monitoring the text on a landing page to see if anything's out of stock, looking for disapproved ads or disapproved products in shopping campaigns. You might also be monitoring budget spending throughout the month, as well as things like monitoring impression share throughout the month. So there's all these quite systematic checks that you're able to do. And of course, you can go in and do these manually for every campaign, every account that you're running in every different language, different country that you're running, but that can be quite an onerous job. So setting up some checks and some scripts that allow you to do this just makes stuff so much easier. So you don't need to be wasting your time just going and doing these manual checks every day, but you can more be alerted as to when something is not performing as it should be and something's out of whack with what we're typically expecting. So yeah, again, we've got our own system that does this called Alert Lab. There's other sort of scripts available out there and stuff like that that can do this as well. But yeah, we find this really important just to make sure we're spending time in the most efficient way on the accounts that we're managing. Another example of automation is to analyze search terms. So what I've got here is a list of search terms from a bed retailer. This is actually pulling out individual words from search terms. So what we do is kind of break down the string of text from a search term into individual words and then aggregate all the data for those individual words up into kind of total performance. So this allows you to quickly detect underperformance. So you can see here we've got a bunch of words that haven't led to any conversions or revenue. We can then also automatically add negative keywords from this. So if this data reaches certain thresholds, basically we program in the thresholds that we want something to achieve, and if the data achieves those thresholds, then it can automatically add in these words as negative keywords. Another example of where you might use automation, and something that we've done a few times, is actually adjusting bids based on weather. We've also done this to adjust ad text based on weather, so that an ad message is properly reflecting kind of what someone's looking for, particularly use that in the travel sector. You can do this, I suppose this is an example for a client that we'd got that sold gloves, but you can do this, you could monitor the weather for whatever it is that you're selling. And this is really just kind of a small example of a wider concept of there's some third-party data here, there's something that we've measured and understood to have correlation with performance of the account. So if there's anything else out there that you feel has correlation with the performance of your account, then so long as you're able to programmatically detect that data and monitor that data, then you'll be able to feed that into your account and actually use that to make tweaks to the way that your account's being managed. So examples of that might be if you're monitoring your competitor pricing, you can use that to actually tip how aggressive you're going to be. If you're monitoring things like auction insight reports, you might see how aggressive your competitors are being on the AdWords campaigns. So you could again use that to kind of affect how you want to kind of respond to that. There might also be things out there like stock prices might affect your performance, exchange rates, there might be certain trending topics in news articles which could affect you. So all of this is data that you would be able to get through some kind of API and would be able to actually plug into an AdWords account or into any other advertising account if you wanted to. So in terms of getting started, I'm aware that what I've gone through there's some quite complex concepts. But if you want to get started with this, it doesn't have to be really complicated. There's simple ways to get started. So firstly, the search engines have, to a limited capacity, their own automations. So I've already mentioned AdWords auto bidding. You've also got things like dynamic search ads in AdWords, which can be quite effective. As well as things like the ad testing platform within AdWords, which is now quite sophisticated and again uses Google's machine learning technology. So there's some kind of pre-built automations which can be quite good. Third-party software, as I mentioned, the likes of DoubleClick offer a really sophisticated solution to a lot of these automation problems. Finding scripts online. So if you're not a programmer yourself, then things like that weather example that I talked you through, you could just do a search for Google AdWords weather script, and there's a bunch of people out there who've created their own weather scripts and who've shared those online. So you'll be able to just take that and just put it into your own account. Basically, it's pretty simple to do that. And even if you don't know coding particularly well, it's often quite simple to just modify bits of that for your own needs. As well as speaking to agencies. So I guess from our experience, some of the more sophisticated agencies who've been working with bigger clients have tended to develop some of their own solutions. So yeah, speak to your agency, see what they can do, see how they can help out with some of this. So this all begs the question of, do we still actually need humans to manage our PPC now that we're automating so much of it? Well, I'm going to say yes, you do. There is still a definite need for humans to be involved in PPC accounts. Humans still need to determine the strategy. Machines aren't yet good enough to actually come up with a strategy and to understand the right elements and the right things to test and the right kind of automations to implement in order to get the most out of an account. Humans also need to have some responsibility, not necessarily for actually analysing the data, but for knowing what data to actually analyse and using that to then lead into the strategy. We also see humans as having a key role in the keyword and ad creation, so particularly I was going to say particularly for international campaigns, but even for English campaigns, you don't want to rely on something like AdWords Express, which will automatically create keywords and ads for you. From what we've seen from that, they tend to be quite poor quality. And I think a good parallel to draw to this when thinking about international campaigns is if you look at something like Google Translate, which is arguably the best translation tool in the world, you would never trust Google Translate to translate your website or to translate an important document that you were writing. So you're not going to trust Google's automation tools to create keywords and to create ads for you in different languages. So there's a huge human element that's needed there in terms of actually getting all that right. And also I've just put on there unforeseen circumstances. Humans need to be involved in kind of detecting what's going on, but also responding well to that. So you might have tests that and checks that alert you as to when something isn't performing as you expect, but you probably need a human to be the one that's responding to that and taking the right action from that. So moving on, I wanted to just briefly look at Amazon, and firstly the growth of Amazon. So this is number of millions of members of Amazon Prime. This is actually US data. I couldn't find this for the UK, but it still illustrates a point that Amazon is growing massively. There's all sorts of articles about there in terms of how Amazon's growing in the UK as well. And Amazon have recently developed their own PPC platform. So I'm not sure how many people are familiar with this. I imagine there's a few people on the webinar who are doing this already. But Amazon have got something called Amazon Marketing Services, which allows you to sponsor products on Amazon. You can also have these kind of banner adverts like the one highlighted at the top there, which allows you to kind of promote a range of products. And this is basically PPC. This works in exactly the same way as something like AdWords. You're choosing keywords, you're setting bid prices. It's super basic right now. There's a very basic API for this, which is just on a limited release at the moment. And yeah, there's still things to think about here in terms of automation. So while the platform is very basic, there are things that you can do to automate elements of it and to make sure you're performing and reporting in the right way from this. So moving on to the future, I suppose if we just stick with Amazon for the moment, where do we expect Amazon to go? Well, firstly, Amazon has been growing consistently over a good number of years now. We expect that to continue. We expect Amazon's growth to keep being a big part of online retail. There is an argument to say that you probably need to be on Amazon. A lot of people start their search journey on Amazon as opposed to on Google. So if you're not present on Amazon, then you can be missing a big chunk of the market. We expect Amazon's platform to become far more sophisticated. Amazon's probably where Google was 8 years ago, or maybe even longer ago. It is really basic right now. So we expect that to become increasingly sophisticated and allow us to have more data to work with. Other Amazons could also emerge as well. So there's kind of a parallel here. We do quite a lot of work in the Chinese market, and in China, over 90% of online retail happens through places like Taobao, Tmall, JD.com. So these are essentially marketplace systems similar to Amazon. So Amazon could grow, it could become one of those. Other ones of those could emerge. I've heard something recently that JD.com have actually entered Europe recently. So they're kind of a competitor to Amazon now. So it'd be interesting to see how things go. I'm not necessarily saying that it's going to grow to be 90% of e-commerce in Europe, but yeah, it could be something to watch out for anyway. In terms of the paid search side, this is how we see the future of paid search. We see there being even more data, even more levers to pull, even more tools that we've got available at our disposal, basically. And as a result of that, we're going to need more automation to actually deal with that increased complexity. So things have got to a certain level now, but they're going to continue to get more complex, and we need to be able to deal with that. I do think in the future there may be a need for fewer humans actually operating a PPC account. So As the automations increasingly become more sophisticated, we probably are going to need less people to actually manage things. Attribution is going to continue to get more and more complex. It's already at a certain level of complexity now, but I think things will become more standard with attribution. We expect to see all retailers using some kind of advanced attribution as kind of the standard approach. I think there will be an increased focus on quality. So over the last few years, Google have really increased the actual focus that they have on quality to really improve the user experience and make sure that adverts aren't spammy, that they're not sending people to spammy websites. I think that will continue as Google continues to focus on user experience. We expect to see quality controls become even tighter. And also more personalization. So we've again seen that Google and other search engines are able to really customize and personalize the search results page to every single individual. And again, as more data becomes available, that's just going to increase. So everyone's search experience is going to be completely different dependent on who they are and the way that they've historically interacted with the search engines. So finally, just in summary, PPC continues to become more complex. It already is extremely complex, but it will keep going that way. Automation is really the only solution to this. If you're not doing some kind of automation at the moment, then odds are that you might be wasting quite a bit of time on processes that could be done in a much more efficient way. Humans are still important for now. We'll see how that evolves. I expect there'll always be some kind of human element to this, but maybe as automation continues to grow, there may be less of a need for this in future. And Amazon's growth can't be ignored. It is a really big player in the world of online retail, and it's becoming a big player in the world of PPC for retail clients as well. So it can't be ignored. So that is it from me. I'm going to hand back to Alan to wrap things up.
Thanks, Pete. There's a lot of information in there, and I know you could have gone into any one of those subjects in much more detail than we've had time for today, but that was a really good overview. We have had some questions coming in, which I will go through now. Firstly, have you worked with any clients who have built their own bidding software or systems? I'm not sure if that relates to have we helped them build their own, or if we've helped them manage and use their own systems, or what, but maybe you can have a go answering that, Pete.
Yeah, I think the short answer is probably that I don't think we actually have, to be honest. I think all the clients that we've worked with, we've managed the bidding for them. We've used our own software and, of course, got the client's input in terms of what they want. But really, it's been a process that we've managed. I suppose to the specific person who asked that question, you know, we would be up for that. We would be up for kind of seeing if you have built your own bidding system. We'd be keen to understand what that is and keen to understand how you work with that. But yeah, the short answer really is I don't think we have really worked with any companies who've built their own systems.
Okay, and I'm sure our development team would be very interested in having a look and helping out and maybe providing some advice on where you're going with it. So as Pete said, if that's a conversation you'd like to have, do let us know, contact us afterwards. So a few of the questions have come in. Can you look into your crystal ball and tell us what you think is going to happen with bid prices in the future?
Yeah, it's a good question. I suppose it's not a straightforward one to answer, but I suppose what I expect to see happen is as we've kind of seen over the last few years, the level of complexity and the level of specificity that you can go down to when it comes to kind of bidding on individuals and really getting an extremely targeted experience. That does mean that performance can be better. So wherever performance is better, we expect to see bid prices be higher because people are bidding to certain KPIs. So I expect to probably see bid prices continue to go up because things will become more complicated, and therefore performance will continue to improve. So I think they won't just naturally increase if performance doesn't get any better. The only reason for bid prices increasing is that more and more people are seeing success with this, and therefore they can afford to pay a little bit more for the bid so that it doesn't eat into the margin of the sales as much. So yeah, odds are though that they probably will continue to increase on AdWords and other common advertising platforms.
Okay, there's a question about Google attribution. You talked about attribution a bit. Most people are probably aware that Google is launching its own attribution tool, or tools actually, because there's Google Attribution and Google Attribution 360. They're currently in public beta, and we're quite heavily involved in testing it, and that's forecasted for general release in April. So Pete, is there anything you can share about Google Attribution?
Yeah, I think Google Attribution's a really exciting step forwards in the industry, really. I think a lot of attribution solutions have been quite fragmented in the past. So you've had attribution options within AdWords, within Analytics, within DoubleClick, within other software that you might be using, such as recruiting attribution or anything else really. So there's been a lot of fragmentation in attribution solutions, and I feel like Google Attribution is kind of the first attempt to bring everything into one and provide a more universal solution to attribution. So yeah, that's kind of where we see things going. We probably do envision a lot of our clients transitioning over to Google Attribution in the coming months, and certainly by the end of the year, I think a lot of people will be using it. Yeah, as you mentioned, Alan, it is still sort of in early beta release at the moment. So we've not seen, or I guess we've not had huge opportunities to do anything too complicated with it. But I think all the right signs are there in terms of it being a pretty good platform to work with, and just allowing people to do a more sophisticated job with attribution without it being sort of a massive project that's going to cost an absolute fortune.
Yeah, well, one of the things we are very interested in with Google Attribution for the 360 version is its native integration with DoubleClick, which we also use, and we think that has potential to be an extremely powerful combined tool. So another question, you mentioned that Amazon has a very basic API. Can you tell us what you can and can't do with that?
Yeah, so right now the API is just available for certain reporting functions. You can't actually use the API to modify any bid prices or anything like that, modify targeting in any way. And even on the reporting side, it's still pretty basic. So on top of the API, we've actually had to build our own system, which kind of scrapes and automates clicks from the Amazon platform. So it kind of automatically downloads various reports for us and then mashes those together into a single report. Because even though the API is allowing us to do some elements of that, it's kind of not allowing the right level of complexity to provide all the detail that our clients have been wanting from Amazon reporting. So yeah, it is super basic right now. I think even the beta API that exists right now was only released a couple of months ago, so it's still very early days, and I expect it to get far better in the coming months. So yeah, it's a step in the right direction at least, but yeah, still pretty basic right now.
Great, thanks for that. And we're keeping a close eye on Amazon for obvious reasons. It is a growing platform, and we're finding more and more of our clients are coming to us to talk about what they can do to get a better return on their investment on AMS in particular. So all eyes on that for now. That brings us to the end of the webinar. Just in closing, can I remind you that we will share a link to a recording of the webinar, and we'll send out some other resources that you might find useful on this particular topic. If you would like a more in-depth discussion about any of the issues we've talked about today, or any other PPC related issues, or any other digital channel questions that you have, please do get in touch. But thank you very much everyone for attending, and have a great day.